I knew something was wrong when Brent's laugh came slithering down the hallway like a fart in an elevator. Trapped, smug, and unmistakably his. I was in the glass conference room, finishing the last touches on the quarterly deck, tweaking font sizes like a lunatic even though the numbers spoke for themselves. We'd beat projections by 6%, and my refinancing terms saved the company over $4 million this quarter alone. I should have felt proud. But instead, I felt like a houseplant someone forgets to water until it's brown, then praises for being low maintenance. Then I heard him through the cracked door, Brent, our self-appointed visionary CEO, who couldn't balance a checkbook without 3 assistants and a latte. He was talking to Melissa from marketing. "We've got to freshen things up. New blood, get rid of the stale faces," he said, his voice thick with the same cologne-soaked charm that made interns giggle and senior VPs roll their eyes. I paused. Stale faces? I was the only exec in that building who hadn't posted a thirst trap on LinkedIn or written a think piece called Why Failure is Sexy. I'd been with the company for 6 years. Quietly. Consistently. I built our financial model from napkin math into a scalable backbone, survived 2 acquisitions, 1 merger, and a software pivot that almost bankrupted us. I was there when Brent got promoted from CRO to CEO because the board wanted someone charismatic. I handled the fallout when his first 3 charismatic ideas tanked harder than a blockbuster IPO. So maybe that's what he meant by stale. Not ineffective, just unsexy. Still, I shook it off. I wasn't there for back pats or ping pong tournaments. I came to work, did my job, kept us solvent. That was my quiet pride. But the laugh lingered, echoing behind my ribs, something about it too rehearsed, too pointed. Anyway, I kept prepping. The quarterly meeting was in an hour, and despite my exhaustion, I hadn't had a full weekend off since April. I was determined to go in with grace. I even put on mascara, which for me is basically a declaration of war. Also, hey, if you're still listening right now and haven't tapped that subscribe or like button, can I ask a tiny favor? It seriously helps us keep these stories coming. 90% of folks just listen and move on, but your click's like handing us a cup of gas to keep the fire burning. All right, back to Brent, the human smoke alarm. When the room started filling, I noticed the mood was off. People looked everywhere but at me. Brent walked in last, carrying a stupid box wrapped in shiny red paper. I assumed it was some kind of team-building prop or one of those weird giveaways he loved. He took his seat at the head of the table and grinned like he was about to announce free puppies or a mass layoff. I went to plug in my laptop to present, and he put a hand on mine. "No need," he said smoothly. "We're gonna kick things off a little differently today." I sat back, wary. Brent stood, lifted the box, and walked it over to me with the exaggerated steps of a game show host. "Nicole," he said, "for your continued efforts and dedication to the team." He opened the box. Inside was a plastic trophy, a gold-colored figurine holding a star. The plaque read, "Thanks for showing up Q2 edition." Laughter, around the table, some of it forced, some of it genuine. The kind of laugh you make when your boss makes a joke and you don't want to be the next stale face. I looked at the trophy, then at him. My ears rang. I didn't say a word. I stood, reached into my blazer pocket, pulled out my ID badge, the same one I'd used to key into that building through snowstorms and late-night fire drills. I placed it gently on the center of the table, and I walked out. No dramatics, no tears. Just the sound of my heels echoing through a hallway that I once sprinted down when Brent forgot a board meeting date and blamed it on my calendar. No one followed me. I got in my car, drove home in silence, and poured a glass of wine at 11:38 a.m. For the first time in 6 years, my inbox wasn't calling me back. My phone didn't vibrate with calendar alerts or vendor requests. I sat on my couch and let the humiliation settle. It didn't burn like I thought it would. It just felt final. Like when a bone sets wrong and you realize it'll never quite be the same again. But here's the part Brent never understood. I wasn't just the CFO in title. I was the named officer on every damn financial document that kept that company floating. My initials were on the credit covenants, the debt schedules, the compliance certifications. I was the signature, and he just erased me publicly on record while holding a plastic trophy. He wanted fresh blood? He was about to bleed. I didn't cry. That surprised me. I just sat there in my car, parked in the same damn spot I'd reverse parked into for 6 years, staring at the crooked line of bird shit smeared across my windshield like some cosmic signature. My mascara hadn't even smudged, just clumped slightly on one lash, a little spider leg of dignity trying to hold it together. Inside me, something cracked, but not like a teacup dropped. More like a glow stick, silent, deliberate, and strangely illuminating. Wasn't just the trophy. God, that would have almost been funny on its own. What got me, what really hollowed me out, was the look on Brent's face when he handed it to me, that smug little smirk, like he'd just euthanized a dog and wanted applause for doing it humanely. "Nicole has been such a trooper," he'd said, turning to the others. "But as we evolve the brand and realign with our long-term vision, it's time to, bring in some fresh perspectives." It's when he placed the box in front of me. And then he added, real casual, "Consider this your legacy award." Legacy, like I was already dead. Laughter skittered around the room, nervous at first, then emboldened. Someone actually clapped. I didn't bother to see who. Probably Seth from BizDev, whose biggest contribution to the company was an air fryer raffle. I looked at the trophy one more time. Then I took my badge, the one with the slightly cracked clip I never replaced, set it down on the table like it was a chess piece in checkmate. Not a word, not a sigh, just silence and heels on cheap carpet tiles. I left during slide 2 of Brent's Vision 2.0 presentation. Later, I'd find out he barely paused, just segued into a sales pipeline update while still grinning like a guy who finally killed the family dog after it stopped matching the Instagram aesthetic. When I got home, I opened my laptop out of habit. Old muscle memory. My inbox was already pinging. One unread message from Brent. Subject line, good luck. I didn't open it. I poured another glass of wine, took off my blazer, and lay on the floor, not the couch. The hardwood floor. Cold, solid, honest. I let it all settle there. The months of 80-hour weeks, the weekends I gave up, the vacations I postponed, the meetings I ran while sick, the broken engagement because I put work first. And the goddamn way Brent would always call me Nikki in boardrooms when he wanted to sound folksy. It wasn't grief I felt. It was something cleaner. Lighter. I closed my eyes, and instead of spiraling, I started thinking through all the signatures I'd made, loan covenants, compliance filings, audit sign-offs, and one in particular rose to the surface. Clause 14b. A line I'd fought to insert 3 years ago when we renegotiated the revolving credit facility. It stated that any unapproved termination of the named CFO constituted a technical breach, triggering a callable loan condition. At the time, Brent waved it off like legal mumbo-jumbo. You really think the bank's going to care about paperwork if we're still performing? He asked. I looked him dead in the eye and said, they don't care when we're performing. They care the second we're not. He shrugged and signed. And now, he just violated that clause, publicly, on record, with a trophy and a room full of witnesses. And I hadn't resigned. That was the thing. There was no letter, no email, no paper trail. Just humiliation dressed up as transition. They hadn't let me leave. They'd removed me, which meant the clause wasn't just alive, it was weaponized. I went into my bedroom, grabbed the manila file I kept at the back of my closet, the one labeled contingency. Inside, printed contracts, backup audits, laminated copy of the covenant terms, and a single yellow sticky note I'd written the night Brent asked me to make him bulletproof. It said, "People forget paper has teeth." By midnight, I'd replied to the risk officer's earlier message. Simple, precise, not employed, badge returned, and no dramatics, just a scalpel sliding between ribs. I closed the laptop, got under the covers, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow above me. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even mad. I was free, and the ink I'd left behind was already doing its work. The morning after I walked out with nothing but my keys and a migraine, I woke up at 5:47 a.m., no alarm. My brain, like a factory that never got the layoff memo, still spun through Q3 forecasts and vendor invoice deadlines. Old habits die hard, especially when they've been surgically stitched to your self-worth. I brewed coffee. Real coffee. Not the burnt tar from the breakroom Keurig that always tasted like sadness in someone else's oat milk. The silence in my apartment was sharp enough to cut toast. No Slack pings. No inbox explosion. No Brent forwarding an email with the subject line "please handle" and no body text whatsoever. And still, beneath the quiet, this current of strange clarity. Like my lungs had more space than usual. I opened my laptop. Just muscle memory. I told myself, just a peek, and there it was. Brent's final gift. Subject line, "wishing you all the best CC. Board at Stratuscap.com, legal at Stratuscap.com, exec team at Stratuscap.com body. Team, as many of you witnessed yesterday, Nicole has decided to move on from her role as CFO. We thank her for her years of service and wish her luck in whatever comes next. We remain committed to forward momentum and are excited about evolving leadership as we scale. Best, Brent decided to move on. That smug, sugar-coated turd of a sentence sat there like a roach in a fruit bowl. He'd spun my public humiliation into a graceful exit like I'd retired to start a vineyard in Sonoma. The CC list was just salt in the wound, meant to rewrite the story before anyone had time to blink. I didn't respond. I didn't reply all. I didn't text Melissa from marketing to tell her what really happened. I just opened another tab, bank portal login, authentication token, encrypted inbox, one unread message. From Lisa Henry, Senior Risk Officer, North Bank Capital Subject, CFO role change confirmation needed body. Nicole, our monitoring systems flagged a potential executive change at Stratus Capital. Per Section 14B of your financing agreement, confirmation of named officer status is required. Please verify your current employment status. LH short. Cold, surgical, banks don't do drama, they do triggers, and that email was the first tremor. I sipped my coffee, looked at the "wishing you all the best" email still open on the side. My reflection in the screen looked older than I felt, but sharper, cleaner. I clicked reply, typed exactly 5 words, "not employed, badge returned," and hit send. And just like that, the rope began to fray. See, Brent never understood the game he was playing. He thought power was noise, presentations, product launches, lunches with VCs where he'd name drop Spotify until someone laughed. but power, real power, is paperwork. Contracts. Clauses no one bothers to read until it's too late. I flashed back to every late night I spent with our legal counsel, elbows deep in red lines and definitions, arguing over material adverse events and executive substitution protocol. I remembered insisting we include named officer provisions in the debt covenants, not because I ever thought I'd use them, but because Brent never read the fine print. He only saw headlines, and I'd written the fine print in ink that bites. The clause was simple, elegant. If the named CFO, me, was terminated without board pre-approval and replacement vetting, it constituted a technical breach of the credit agreement. No drama, no need for fraud or scandal, just a ticked box on a form that didn't get ticked. That breach gave the bank the right to call the $190 million revolving line, immediately. I once told Brent, half joking, "You fire me wrong and this company goes lights out by Friday." He laughed, called it typical Nicole paranoia. Well, tick-tock, by noon. I had a follow-up from Lisa. "Thank you. Our internal review is underway. We'll notify your former employer of next steps per the terms." No emojis, no smiley face, just precision. I sat back, laptop warm against my thighs, and stared out the window. Brent thought he'd won. He thought he'd erased me. But what he didn't realize was that I had designed the walls of that company's house, and every beam had my signature carved into it. Pull me out the wrong way, and the whole thing groans. I didn't need revenge. I didn't even need credit. All I needed was compliance to do its job, and it just had. My phone rang at 8:11 the next morning, an unfamiliar number, but the area code was downtown. Brent's little kingdom. I let it buzz 4 times, just long enough for the anxiety on the other end to stew, before I finally answered with a calm, clipped Nicole. A breathless voice tumbled in. "Marissa, Brent's executive assistant." "Hi, Nicole. Sorry to bother you. Just quick question, and it's probably nothing, but did you by any chance submit anything to the lender?" I didn't answer. She scrambled to fill the silence. "It's just, legal said they got a message from North Bank, something about a compliance trigger. We're just trying to understand what's going on." Click. I hung up. No cursing, no yelling, just a clean severance of sound. Let them sit with the static. I sipped my coffee, black, hot, steady, as if nothing at all had happened. Because, in a way, nothing had. I hadn't submitted anything. I'd simply replied to an inquiry with the truth. Across town, the building I helped hold together with gum, willpower, and bulletproof financials was already starting to crack. I could picture the panic setting in like a gas leak, silent but suffocating. Brent, probably still doing his fake jovial strut down the hall, hadn't yet realized that power isn't performance. It's paperwork, and no one else had the keys to the vault. By 10 o'clock, I'd gotten 3 more calls. One from a blocked number, voicemail transcript read, "Hey Nicole, can you call me back? It's urgent." No name, of course. Cowards love anonymity. One from HR, disguised as a courtesy exit check-in. And one, my personal favorite, from a junior finance manager who messaged me on LinkedIn with a desperate, "Hey, super random but quick question. Who's our current signee on the Q3 compliance form? Can't find it in the shared drive lol." Lol indeed. I didn't answer any of them. Meanwhile, back at HQ, the gaps in the floorboards were starting to widen. The thing about removing a named officer is it's not just a title, it's a functional keystone. Every quarterly compliance filing, every covenant certification, every investor-facing assurance, those required my explicit sign-off. Not CFO as a role, me, Nicole R. Halstead, my name, my digital ID, my encrypted signature. They had fired the only legally authorized signature. But they hadn't thought it through, because they never thought anything through. They assumed titles were hats, swappable, decorative. They didn't realize the hat had teeth. At 11:23, HR finally emailed me. "No, we're sorry." No acknowledgement of what they'd allowed to happen in that boardroom. Just corporate backpedaling at its finest. Subject: employment clarification. "Hi Nicole, following recent developments, we wanted to clarify the nature of your departure. There appears to have been some miscommunication, and we'd like to confirm whether your decision to step away constitutes a formal resignation, or if you'd be open to discussing a transition period. We value your contributions and hope to find a mutually beneficial resolution." No signature. Just people and culture department. Like that absolved them of identity. I didn't reply, because I hadn't resigned. They had mocked me, publicly stripped me of professional authority in front of the entire executive team. Brent had made damn sure it was performative. No one gets handed a participation trophy and told they're no longer aligned with the company's vision and then gets to call that a mutual parting of ways. That wasn't a resignation. That was a reputational firing disguised as office theater. And now, they wanted to quietly reverse the humiliation, as if I could just sneak back in, invisible, and sign their little forms. Let them fix it behind the scenes. No, you don't uncrack an egg. You don't undo a room full of laughter. You don't put out a fire by asking the arsonist to circle back. They had made the split public, so the consequences would be too. I left my apartment around noon, not because I needed to go anywhere, but because the walls were too quiet and I wanted to be outside when the real calls started. The ones that came after risk. After the lawyers finally read the clause, they'd all nodded through without blinking. I walked to the little co-working space down the block, just a desk, decent Wi-Fi, and bad jazz playing through dusty speakers. I ordered a turkey wrap, pulled out my laptop, and opened a spreadsheet I was building for a nonprofit client. I figured I'd give my brain something productive to chew on while Brent and Co. discovered that their new interim CFO, a guy who once submitted a department budget in PowerPoint, wasn't recognized by the bank. They didn't just remove me, they dismantled their own scaffolding. And now the load was shifting. Every email I didn't answer made the silence louder. And silence, in the right hands, is a sledgehammer. They wanted leaner leadership, they got it. Brent held a town hall 2 days after I left, wearing a blazer that still had the security tag on it and confidence that came prepackaged with his teeth-whitened grin. The announcement was live-streamed company-wide. I didn't watch it, but someone sent me the link. I clicked muted just to see the body language. There he was, center stage, palms open, like a televangelist asking for donations. Folks, he said, as we evolve and scale, we're embracing agility. Today, I'm excited to announce that Kevin Roston will serve as our interim CFO as we transition into our next phase. Kevin, a former sales lead whose claim to fame was once pitching a customer service chatbot to a funeral home and calling it emotionally intelligent grief support. Kevin, who submitted a quarterly department budget on an Excel sheet with formulas so broken it literally spelled out #div/0 on every line. Kevin, who once asked me if depreciation was a tax write-off or just an attitude thing. That Kevin, now holding the financial spine of a $340 million tech company. I closed the tab. Back at HQ, they were scrambling to prep for an investor call and a flashy expansion announcement into the EU market. Brent had been hyping it for months. They even booked a PR firm to leak whispers of a disruptive international move to TechCrunch. But first, they had to file their 10Q quarterly financials that legally needed one very specific box checked, named Officer Financial Compliance, certified by CFO. Problem? There was no CFO, not on paper, not in the bank's eyes, not with any legal authority. Kevin had a new title, but none of the embedded rights, signatures, or verified access that I had. No fingerprint on the loan docs, no credentials in the bank's officer registry, and I'd made sure of that. When I fought for that clause, I'd insisted on airtight language. Any replacement CFO had to be approved by both the board and the lending institution. Not just named, but vetted, verified, onboarded in writing. Otherwise, the named officer provision stayed open like a wound, so they filed late, 2 days past the deadline, and when they finally submitted it, that box named Officer Financial Compliance was blank, not unchecked, blank, like the digital form stared back and whispered nope. Still, Brent powered forward. He doubled down in the investor deck. Our shift toward leaner leadership enables faster decision-making and reduces organizational lean leadership, drag reduction. All sound bites, all fluff. Meanwhile, the finance team was duct taping Kevin's incompetence into presentable reports, HR was issuing emergency NDAs to silence panicked whispers, and legal was doing what legal does best, pretending the boat isn't sinking if you don't look at the water. But the numbers don't care. Compliance doesn't care. And most importantly, North Bank doesn't care. They care about the clause, the signature, one they don't have anymore. I'd spent years building credibility with them. Monthly check-ins, quarterly reviews, always on time, always clean. That kind of reputation doesn't transfer with a handshake or a LinkedIn update. Brent thought if he just kept talking, the world would believe him, that a PowerPoint and a haircut could make Kevin CFO in the eyes of regulators and lenders. But power doesn't live in the spotlight. It lives in the margins, in the forms, in the contracts no one reads until they bite. They wanted me gone. They got it. They wanted a yes man with a Slack emoji addiction and a firm handshake. They got that too. And now they were sprinting toward an investor call with a finance lead who once asked if EBITDA was that crypto thing. Meanwhile, I was in a shared workspace eating a microwave burrito and watching my old company edge closer to a compliance cliff like a man flossing on the Titanic. I wasn't gloating, I wasn't even smiling. But I will admit I didn't miss it. The badge, the meetings, the endless loop of explaining how interest accrual worked to people with strategic in their job titles. They'd cut me out to look agile, and now they were about to find out that speed means nothing when the brakes are gone. It hit at 8:14 a.m., the kind of hit that doesn't scream or kick down the door, it just rings. Once. Calm, professional. The way all true disasters begin. Brent was backstage in the auditorium they'd rented for the investor briefing, hunched over an iced coffee that probably cost more than my rent back in '09, practicing the phrase synergistic growth pathway in front of a fold-out mirror. He was wearing a custom navy suit and the confidence of a man who thought he was about to be profiled in fast company. The call came through on his personal cell, no caller ID, just a clean, motionless ringtone. He picked up with that half-slick, half-bored "this is Brent," expecting a last-minute AV update or a caterer complaint. Instead, he got Lisa Henry from North Bank Capital. She didn't waste time. "Mr. Corrigan, we've noticed a covenant breach. Your CFO's termination was not board-approved, nor was a replacement certified through our officer registry. The clause requires a named officer at all times. As of now, the revolving line of credit is in technical default. Brent blinked, like he'd been spoken to in a foreign language. What clause? Who are you again? She didn't even sigh. Clause 14B, Mr. Corrigan. It was triggered automatically when we confirmed the status of Miss Halstead. You personally removed her designation, publicly and in writing. We've initiated internal protocols. A formal notice will be sent by noon. Silence. Then Brent made a sound like he was trying to laugh but forgot how. Well, we've got someone else. Kevin Roston. He's interim, Lisa interrupted. Interim titles do not satisfy named officer conditions, especially when the individual has no record in our compliance system. Mr. Roston does not meet the requirements for fiduciary oversight as defined in the lending agreement. The color drained from Brent's face in front of 3 junior marketers and 1 terrified sound tech. I'm going to call legal. That's advisable. Click. The line went dead and then it began. Text alerts. Emails with red flags, 1 board member then another. 2 were already in the building for the presentation. They hadn't even had coffee yet when their phones started vibrating like bees in a jar. The first call came from Irene Whitlock, former SEC counsel, current board chair. Did you remove Nicole's designation in writing? Brent tried to play dumb. I don't remember if we formally. Legal spoke from the doorway, voice small and funereal. Yes, you did. In the HR system and in the 10Q email thread. We have it on record. Brent sat down, hard. Kevin wandered in, holding a manila folder like a kid in a Halloween costume too big for him. Hey, quick question, he said. Do I need to know what a covenant clause is before I talk on this call? The room went still. Irene's voice came again, this time through Brent's speakerphone. Brent, do you understand the severity of what you've done? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Meanwhile, across town, I was sitting at a quiet cafe tucked between a dry cleaner and a pet grooming place. I had just finished revising the cash flow statement for the nonprofit I'd picked up as a consulting client. I was sipping green tea, not because I like it, but because it felt like the kind of thing a person without chaos on their calendar might drink. My phone buzzed, email notification. 1 line previewed on the screen. Subject, notification of default initiation Stratus Capital Holdings. I didn't even open it. I already knew what it said. The line of credit I'd helped negotiate had teeth. Teeth I'd filed myself. Trigger conditions weren't just ink, they were tripwires. Once breached, it wasn't just about money. It was about reputation. About whether the bank could trust the people running the ship. And Brent had just yanked the wheel, ejected the navigator, and handed control to a guy who didn't know the difference between a cruel and a cappuccino. All while wearing a new suit and smiling for the cameras. From where I sat, everything was quiet. Birds chirping. A distant lawnmower humming like a bored bee. Serene. Let them scramble. Let them patch holes in a ship they sank themselves. I'd done nothing but tell the truth to the right person in the right format at the right time. The rest? Gravity. It took less than 36 hours for the storm to land. No lightning, no sirens. Just 1 quiet email sent at 6:03 a.m., stamped with the full weight of a billion-dollar institution. Subject, formal notice of technical default Stratus Capital Holdings attachments. Notice of default form 14 BPDF. Legal tried to dress it up, of course. Phrases like open to negotiation and procedural clarification started slithering into their memos. Brent told the board it was a temporary administrative snag. But the language in the notice didn't leave much room for Brent speak. It was plain, clinical. Named officer status voided. Placement not registered. Line suspended pending formal board action and bank review. Compliance window exceeded. Cure period expired. Translation: the bank's $190 million revolving credit line, the money they used to cover payroll, bridge receivables, and keep the lights on, was frozen, and payroll was due in 4 days. I imagined the room they sat in that morning. Brent pacing in circles, his tie loosened just enough to look in control. Legal with their folders open like defibrillators, Kevin nervously scrolling Investopedia under the table like it was a life raft. Someone must have finally said the thing out loud, call her, and so he did, twice. I watched both calls come in, declined them without a second thought. Third one, I blocked the number. That was the real gift in all this clarity, not bitterness, not rage, just done. He burned the bridge. Just happened to be the architect who built it with tripwire and the support beams. Then came the email. Subject line, let's reconnect urgent. It was desperate in that pathetic, panicked way only men like Brent can muster when they realize the world no longer believes in their haircut. Nicole, given recent developments, we'd like to formally extend an offer to return, on a consultancy basis, to assist with compliance certification and re-establish the bank's confidence. Compensation will reflect the critical nature of the role. This is time-sensitive. Please respond at your earliest convenience. He couldn't even say my name properly in person. Now he wanted it typed on a contract. I didn't respond. That afternoon, HR followed up. We're prepared to expedite onboarding and provide flexible terms. I archived it. Legal tried next, something about mutual benefit, precedent protection, and discretion regarding transition optics. I forwarded it to my lawyer, then took a walk. That evening, a friend from inside texted me they're panicking. Irene wants Brent out before the board gets sued. Kevin's crying in the parking lot. This is insane. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my client, the nonprofit with the tiny office and the founder who still handwrites thank you notes, and told them I had space to take on more projects if they needed. She got quiet on the other end of the line, said we'd be honored. That was the first time I smiled in days because I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for revenge to explode like a firework. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. Brent had already proven everything for me with every smug word, every ego-drunk decision, every time he looked at the framework I built and thought replaceable. He'd wanted a clean break, a fresh face, new blood. Now his empire was running dry. I used to think my silence would be mistaken for weakness. Now I realized it was the sharpest tool I had. Let them flail. Let them scramble to fix forms they didn't understand, cover gaps they created, beg a bank that only speaks in terms and conditions. I was done saving them. Done explaining things to people who never listened. Done translating fluency in numbers for men who thought success came with a ring light and a slogan. 4 days to payroll. No money, no signature, no CFO. Just a leadership team drowning in buzzwords and the slow realization that the woman they mocked was the only person who ever knew how to swim. The final push didn't come with a gavel or a slammed door. It came with a question, one sentence, spoken through a staticky speakerphone by a man who didn't raise his voice because he didn't have to. It was Thursday morning, 2 days before payroll. Brent had called an emergency board meeting after exhausting every PR deflection, legal tap dance, and were working on its stall tactic he had left. The conference room was full, every director present, 2 via Zoom from hotel suites that suddenly felt a lot less secure. Coffee sat untouched. No pastries this time. No catered optimism. And then came the voice. George Talman, lead investor representative. His name alone made interns straighten their backs and execs check their inboxes twice. He didn't waste time. Who authorized the termination of the named CFO? The room went still. The kind of still where even air conditioning sounds guilty. Brent opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Well, I wouldn't say termination exactly. It was more of a realignment. He was cut off not by George, but by their own corporate attorney. Quiet man in round glasses who hadn't said a word all morning. He calmly reached for a thick binder, flipped 3 pages and said, without looking up, "You did. It's recorded." He turned the binder slightly. The tab read, HR Exec Decisions Q2/Q3. There, printed in black and white, was the email Brent had personally sent to HR the afternoon after the trophy incident. Subject, Officer Realignment Nicole Halstead. Body, please finalize all paperwork reflecting Nicole's exit. Her duties will be reassigned under interim leadership. No backfill necessary. The word exit was underlined. Brent stared at it like it was written in fire. I didn't mean for it to, George interrupted again. Calm, icy. The bank has ruled it a termination. Clause 14B has been triggered. They've confirmed a full loan call is in motion. 5 days to cure, or the credit line is revoked in full. No reaction, just oxygen fleeing the room. Someone coughed, a chair squeaked. Irene, the board chair, slowly folded her hands like she was trying to remember how prayer worked. Brent sat back, pale, silent. That stupid suit suddenly looked too big on him, like it belonged to someone competent. The attorney spoke again. Default terms are non-negotiable unless the original named officer is reinstated, certified, and approved by the bank. Option has been declined. A few board members exchanged looks, not the worried kind, the calculating kind. Brent had officially become dead weight in a sinking boat. One by one, you could see the mental math, reputational risk, fiduciary duty, damage control. It wasn't rage in their eyes, it was self-preservation. Irene cleared her throat, so we're in a 5-day window. No funds, no signatory, and no legal remedy. Silence again. Brent tried to speak. Can still bring her back, George cut him off one last time. She was offered that. She declined. You had your chance. Another voice, soft female, came in through Zoom. Director Patel, normally too polite to interrupt anyone. Brent, remind us, why did you remove her again? He blinked. We wanted to refresh the brand. It wasn't even a full sentence. Just a fragment of the same marketing fluff he'd been spewing for months. But now, it landed like a confession. A refresh. That was the rationale for removing a licensed, trusted, compliant CFO with a flawless record and years of institutional knowledge. They'd pulled the foundation out from under their own house and were shocked the roof collapsed. One board member reached for his phone, clearly texting someone beneath the table. Another began gathering her papers. No one defended Brent. No one nodded. No one said a word. He was alone. Meanwhile, across town, I was reviewing a vendor invoice with a spreadsheet open and a jazz playlist humming in the background. I hadn't checked my phone all morning. I didn't need to because I already knew the script. Brent would flail. Legal would panic. The board would freeze. And in that silence, my absence would echo louder than any revenge I could have orchestrated. I didn't need to burn the building down. They handed me the match. And then they lit it themselves. The morning after the emergency board meeting, the CFO seat was still empty, untouched like a crime scene. No nameplate, no announcements. Just a conspicuous silence in the org chart, a digital ghost with access no one could fake. And Brent, he was gone. Official word was leadership restructuring, but the internal memo didn't even try to spin it. No thank you, no legacy fluff. Just a clean bullet point buried in a Thursday morning status update. Interim leadership transition effective immediately. The board had voted him out before sunrise. I didn't find out from LinkedIn or some press leak. I didn't have to. At 7:42 a.m., my phone buzzed with a single message, no contact, no name, just one line. Clause 14B. Understood, no apology, no explanation. Just the digital equivalent of someone dropping to one knee too late. I didn't respond. I was already deep into the reconciliation sheet for a nonprofit housing project in East Cleveland, double-checking vendor disbursements and trying to track a $600 variance in their expense report. It was the kind of work that used to be too small for me. Now it felt like breathing. Real numbers, real people. No boardroom games or buzzwords, just impact. A soft chime broke my focus. Notification from my firm's backend portal. New deposit received retainer contract #117 a client. Halberd Partners. Amount, $162,000 scope. Full financial restructure and audit compliance integration. Brent's former competitor. The same firm he once laughed at for being too old school and too risk-averse. Now they wanted me to rebuild what he broke. They didn't want a pitch deck. They didn't want branding language or someone who knew how to say ecosystem 5 times in a sentence. They wanted stability. Signatures, teeth in the contract. They wanted me. I sat back, let the screen glow for a moment, and sipped what was left of my lukewarm coffee. Outside, a city bus groaned by, spraying a wave of October leaves into the air like confetti. I watched them scatter and spin, aimless and beautiful. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt precise. Brent's empire didn't explode. There was no headline, no whistleblower, no FBI raid. It just unwound, quietly, logically, like a machine with one cog removed, spinning until it stripped itself bare, and all I did was step aside. Let the contract do what it was built to do. Let the silence finish the sentence he started when he handed me that trophy and thought humiliation was a management strategy. I was never the one who needed to make noise. I was the name they forgot was still on the deed. The signature they thought they could erase. And now, I was just a woman in a co-working space, closing a tab and smiling. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.